Hey guys, I know we're probably a little bit early, but as usual, I wanted to survey you guys and get your thoughts on what you think will happen on the next ban list. And so thank you to the 211 players that did respond to my survey. You can definitely follow me on Twitter to make sure you don't miss out on future ones. And as always, definitely go check out those discount codes for Yu-Gi-Oh! Singles as well as supplies. All of that you can find out in the description below. Now, in terms of the player profile of those that did respond to the survey, so essentially about 85% were at least semi-competitive, which means they at least went to locals level consistently, for example, and that's usually been the case for my survey responses, so definitely keep that in mind in terms of results. So we're going to start off with Ash Blossom, and so I did see a lot of Twitter discourse over the last few weeks in terms of, whether this card should actually get banned or not. It looks like most people, like 81%, do think that it would stay the same. There's a decent chunk that think it would be semi-limited, and I wouldn't be too surprised if that happens. I mean, me as a branded player, I'm actually okay with Ash. The only thing I'm not really happy with is when, let's say, Ash can be used as a call by the grave when I try to like Mulcharmy my opponent, because, going second is hard enough as it is. So that's where I don't like how Ash functions, but other than that, I'm okay. And then speaking of Mulcharmies, we do have Fuwalos. This is definitely the best one out of the Mulcharmies, but it looks like 88%, most of them don't think any change would happen. 10% think it would be semi-limited, maybe at some point down the line for sure. I think the whole +6 sort of the discrepancy in terms of how many cards you would put back, I think that number was a little bit too large. I mean, hardly ever are you putting cards back. So I think if that was maybe a little bit shortened, it would have been maybe a little more fair, but nonetheless, I think I'm okay with that. And Perlia, kind of similar, but if anything, more people thinking that it would stay the same. And then you have Lancia. So right now, Malice, while respectable, is certainly not at the level that it once was. And so I'm sure if you had asked this a few months back, this would be much higher in terms of whether it be banned. I do think that while it might not be strong right now, it does have its moments throughout its history. And, lingering floodgate kind of effects, I can definitely see at some point getting hit too. And next we have Fallen and Virtuous. This is a relatively new card, but definitely has been sort of popular in terms of ban list predictions, and 23% thinking that it would get limited, and even 19% think it'd be semi-limited. So I think maybe right now with like the branded sort of product release and promotion, I'm not sure if Konami would hit it right now. I could definitely understand it if they did at some point. It is really, really strong card, not just for branded, but just pretty much most decks out there right now. But it has been, I thought, a pretty nice card design. And as a branded player, I would love for this to stay, but I would understand it if this did get hit for now. And then D-Fissure, we were talking about those lingering floodgate effects. So D-Fissure, definitely one of those, really should go away. 28% thinking it would get banned. You have something like Radiant Typhoon, for example, and quite several other decks that are side decking this, or maybe some might even main it, who knows. Really strong, and I think that this card would eventually go away. This came back from 1 to 3 back during Tier 0 format with Tearlaments, where there was this very minor list, I think it was in December, where instead of trying to directly hit Tearlaments, they just essentially kind of unbanned cards that would help counter Tearlaments, which included D-Fissure. Wasn't really the great choice, and hopefully this goes away again. And then Dragon's Mind. So most people did not think anything would change. I did put this on here just because something like Draco Tail, they are able to put this and in the side deck, and a lot of different decks can actually make this work too. And for me, I've never been a fan of counter traps and tier 1 strategies. I think they're strong enough already. They don't need counter traps. I get it. It's not searchable, but it is really, really strong if they are able to have access to it. But looks like most people don't expect any change. So then we have Mistaken Rest. It's another floodgate, and it's something that is a pretty decent popular side deck choice going first. So 70% thinking it would get banned, 20% think it would get limited. I think that's at least a start. It's not searchable, so that would definitely reduce it, but really, really strong card. And continuing on with the floodgates, DDG, so 20% thinking that this would get banned. This is another one I think should go at some point for sure. And it used to be a pretty popular thrust target. Most players I don't think are really running thrust anymore, but it is really strong and similar to like, different dimensional fissure and like shifter. I think something that banishes everything kind of needs to go. And then Christia, so this almost half thinking that it would get banned. It wouldn't surprise me with how Konami, let's say, banned Gimmick Puppet Nightmare before banning Sanctifier, for example. And even if you were to ban Sanctifier now, it wouldn't even matter because most branded players are locking without Sanctifier, right? Just using Fallen and Virtuous. So I can totally understand Christia going away. Now it is, for example, pretty easy to out right now. Like Droplets is very popular, and of course Fallen and Virtuous is really popular to get it. But for the most part, those are very like hard. You have to open it, and so I get it if this were to go away. And kind of similarly, you have Spell Cancer, but I guess I'm not sure what other decks outside of maybe like Crystron are really putting this out consistently, but it did have some moments in its history, like the super heavy Samurai engine, for example, thankfully that only lasted a very short time, but they were able to put this out too. Really strong, over half thinking it would get banned, even though I don't think it's seen that much play, but definitely a card that can go. And then another Floodgate is Bagooska, so a third thinking that it would get banned. Pretty surprised it's even survived this long. There's a lot of different Xyz Floodgate monsters that's definitely eventually gotten banned over time, and I think this is just one of them, especially being a rank 4. It's really, really easy to make, and even something like, let's say, Lunalights, where they have like they're unaffected and then they can still put out the Bagooska, certainly really strong, and I think at least at some point this card will go away. And then we're going to move on to sort of like the wanted engine, because with like, let's say, Demok and Dragoon, that has been pretty popular recently for a lot of different decks. And so limited, 35% for wanted, and then kind of similarly, you also have Black Witch, which is another candidate, whether either or maybe even both, but 23% thinking that it would get limited. And then Gravity Controller, 14% thinking it would get banned. So from my understanding, this is sort of something that enables, let's say, yummy combos, and that's why it's definitely on the chopping block. So it's funny to me seeing this, because so for those of you that maybe started only a few years ago, Gravity Controller came out near the tail end of Master Rule 4, back when we had to summon monsters from the extra deck into the EMZ, and then you sort of had to have link monsters that actually create errors so that you can special summon extra deck monsters into the main monster zone. So sometimes when you're, let's say, forced to summon, let's say, a fusion monster into the EMZ and you kind of have to clear it, you would just use something like Gravity Controller, and I remember having to do that playing Cyber Dragons. But it was just funny because this card sort of came out when we already knew Master Rule 5 was coming, so it really had very little time where it actually saw any play at all. And now it's just funny years later that it is actually considered ban-worthy. And then moving on to Yummy. So we do have Cupsy Yummyway, a big popular candidate in terms of getting banned, 28% predicting it would be so. And then let's say in terms of the main deck monsters, Cupsy, over half thinking that it would get limited. And it's funny that even with the Snatchy limit, where a lot of people sort of wrote this deck off, clearly it's really strong still. So definitely some hits that people predict will be happening. And then moving more on to the Draco Tail stuff, we have 5 mana, which of course enables like the turn 0 plays, and the Artholian that can like bounce the opponent's monster and then set up plays for their own turn. It is definitely strong. Draco Tail definitely is doing quite well right now, and I guess people are already kind of sick of it and want some more hits, because the previous hits on the last list, like Mululu and like, let's say, Kirudu 1, clearly was not enough. And you also have Rahu, over half thinking that it would get limited. And then Flame, I put this on here because I'm a branded player and I always felt this card is really strong, negating, let's say, branded fusion, but clearly most people don't think so and think that it would stay the same. And then you have Engage. So this card with Sky Striker, but a lot of different kind of decks can still play this too, along with Hornet Drones, which we'll get to in a little bit. So Engage, most people do think that it would stay the same. And you know what, with how much Sky Striker product is promoted by Konami, I don't think this would get hit either. I was actually quite surprised though that it even came off the list at some point a few years back, but I think this card probably is here to stay. You have Radiant Typhoon Vision. This card can also be kind of generic, and speaking of Sky Striker, they are also going to be playing this, but of course Radiant Typhoon, as well as any other decks that might have a decent amount of quick play spells. So I used to say Konami doesn't seem to like draw spells and they usually hit them, but that theory kind of went out the window when they brought back Engage. But I think, you know, about a third almost thinking that it will get limited. I do think that it could potentially happen pretty soon, but maybe not on this list, and this card is actually getting reprinted in the next rarity set. And then speaking of Radiant Typhoon, you also have Chant. Looks like most people didn't think it would be changed, but about, let's say, 13% think get limited, and another 12% thinking it'd be semi-limited. And then moving on to more of the K9 stuff. So Izuna, you know what? Most people, I think, would think that this is going to stay the same, but it's really the Ripper that they predict, almost half thinking that it would get banned. And I guess if you ban this, and you know, with Izuna, I guess it's fine. I mean, sure, they can still make some Xyz plays, but those are usually not very toxic. I just hate with like Ripper. I hate being punished for hand trapping the opponent when I'm trying to go second. And again, it's already hard enough as it is going second, and then to be punished. I think that's why a lot of people think that this card will go. And then you have Vanquish Soul. It's kind of funny how quickly they got their cards back compared to, let's say, Branded Fusion, where we were kind of like a road deck for a while after Branded Fusion was put to 1, and it took quite some time for that to come back. But looks like a quarter thinking that it would get put to 1, and kind of the similar concept for Raisin. And then Malice, it looks like a lot of people hate Malice, so almost a third thinking that Marshare will get limited. I mean, maybe at the very least if they could hit like Shifter, something like indirect hits would certainly be a start. And then you have Liger Dancer. We kind of talked about this earlier. So almost half thinking that it would be put to 1. And you know, in terms of towers, we've had a lot of different kind of tires historically, right? Even let's say Ad Ignister, Raidraptor, which maybe some of you may scoff at those names now, but at some point in its history, those were still pretty respectable decks, at least at a rogue level. The difference with this one though is that it actually nukes the opponent's board, and they usually make 2 of it. So that's, I think, where it gets maybe really strong and kind of annoying. And if you at least put it to 1, I think most people can at least try to manage with 1. So I can kind of see the sentiment here. And then you have like your Fiendsmith stuff, and it's funny, nowadays it looks like most people don't really expect changes, let's say with Engraver, Tract, and Requiem. So it's kind of reminiscent of, let's say, like the Invoke package a few years back, where a lot of people really thought at least one of the cards in the package would get limited or semi-limited, for example. Never did, and then now no one's playing it. Maybe something the same will happen with like the Fiendsmith engine when we look back on it years down the line. Caesar, though, a quarter do think that it would get banned. Definitely something worth considering. It's a topic that's come up quite a bit now at this point. It is really strong. You at least have a lot of droplets running around, and I guess technically Falling and Virtuous, but depending on the deck, I've come across Raziel Detonator still around even in this format, and being able to protect it, that gets kind of hard. So definitely worth considering for this one. And then with Prayer, almost 2/3 do think that this card would get limited. I'm not a huge fan of Mitsurugi, to be honest with you, but this is another one that recently got some product support, of course, by Konami, so maybe they won't do anything this time around. And then some other potential hits among the unlimited cards that people could put in free text. Arthalion, definitely one of them. Nat Beast, I'm going to guess it's for Magnet Warrior. So it is a strong card, but from my understanding, even Magnet Warrior players think that this card is more of a win more card. And you do have, let's say, like Droplet, that's really popular. And I mean, sure, again, you do have to kind of hard draw it, but I'm not sure if it's seeing enough play for it to be banned, but maybe at some point. And Impulse is a little bit restricted to specific decks. Let's say like Malice is a clear one. It is a really, really strong card though, so maybe if a lot of the top decks can play this eventually, then this is definitely another consideration. So moving on to the semi-limited and limited section, Droll and Lockbird. This was recently put to semi-limited, which is a big change compared to how we sort of accepted this card all these years. It looks like actually a bigger portion, 44% think that this card would get limited, and so, or even 15% thinking it get banned. And I mean, if it does get banned, I do just hope that they will start hitting some other decks directly that tend to search a lot, especially if you kind of assume Shifter might go away too, just so that they're not so crazy. And then Hornet Drone. So first off, I did make a bit of a mistake on the survey originally. This was sort of in the unlimited section. Thanks for the person that pointed out. I did fix it, and about a third thinking that it would get banned. This has come up in ban discussions back in TOS format too, when Engage, all that package was really popular. This leading to like Yummy Combo really easy, for example. I can definitely see an argument for this being banned too. And then Habakiri, so interestingly, only 10% thinking it would get banned. I guess they're more so favor of the Prayers hit, because again, I'm a little biased. I'm not a huge fan of Mitsurugi, but there you go. And then Prosperity, looks like most people don't expect to change to. Technically, I do think it's a ban-worthy card, just maybe not right now, because you don't have as many decks playing it as they once used to, but really, really strong card for sure. Now, Shifter, almost a half thinking that it would get banned. This card, honestly, needs to go. I don't understand Konami. At least they put it to 1. I'm grateful for that, I guess, but even that change came years too late than what it should have. I don't think this is a healthy card. Hopefully, this does go away at some point. Call by the Grave, so 19% thinking it would get banned. So essentially, as I sort of talked about, going first is always just really strong, and sort of throughout the years it just gets stronger and stronger, and being able to negate hand traps, I think maybe it's time for these cards to go. For example, let's say Triple Tactics Talent and Drop Designator. These cards where it just makes going first a lot stronger than they already are. Maybe it should be time for them to go, but curious to see what will happen. And same thing for Anti-Spell Fragments, another Floodgate that really, I don't know, at least they put it to 1, sure, but it really should be banned. This card has no place in Yu-Gi-Oh! Just being able to completely wipe out a third of the cards, so over a third, or rather almost a third, thinking that this card would get banned. And then some other, your usual Floodgates. So all of these, I'm totally fine if they also disappear. It obviously depends on the format, where one's just sort of better than the other, but they're usually around the same amount, actually, in terms of people predicting it would get banned. And then some other potential changes among the limited or semi-limited. I mean, Sharvara, people just want that back. Sacred Tree, I was actually surprised it didn't come back. This was originally limited because of, let's say, the Runic version, and this was also during tier format, if I recall. And no one's really playing Runic stuff nowadays anyway, so I think this card could totally come back and people wouldn't really notice. Branded Fusion, ironically, it just came back to 2, but looks like a lot of people want this to go back to 1. at least for pure branded Despia, I think we're actually even okay with that, even if that were to happen. I mean, with all the product support, I don't think it would right now. But with branded Despia, at least, you know, we actually prioritize synchro plays more anyways, and Branded Fusion, ironically, has gotten a little weaker now that usually you don't play like Lobelian and Lost anymore. But yeah, definitely curious to see what will happen. And then finally, moving on to the ban section, we have Kid Kalos, actually 17.5%, thinking it will come back to 1. Maybe at some point, not sure if anytime soon. And then you have Meow Meow Mew, a third, thinking it would rather over half thinking it would come back to 1. And I think that's totally fine. This card could totally come back. It was banned where at that point, you know, these one card combos, I mean, we've had way stronger one card combos since then anyways, and this was strong with the Brave Token Engine, which is a package that no one's playing nowadays anyways. So I think this card could come back. Usually when tier 1 decks are hit, they at least stay in the rogue tier. But with Prankids, when this card got banned, they just completely disappeared in competitive play because the deck is super inconsistent without something like this Link one. So I think they can definitely get this back. And then we have Arise Heart, 6% thinking that this could come back to 1. I don't think so, and I'm glad most people think it will stay the same. And then you have Borreload Savage Dragon, so actually over a third thinking it will come back to 1. You do have some rocket support coming down the line very soon, so that's probably sort of the reasoning there. And you know, if this was exclusive to rockets, I think that would have been fine. This card was really strong since its release. I actually personally played Pendulum Magicians in early 2019 when this card came out, so this was my ace monster and I do miss it, but I'm not sure if it's going to come back right now. And then you have Heavy Storm, where 3/4 essentially thought that it will come back to 1, and I think that's totally realistic as well. And finally, we have Mystic Mind. Thankfully, most people are sane and do expect that this card will stay banned. Some other potential releases. So Fairy Tail Snow was actually a pretty popular one. I was kind of surprised because this card was originally banned during like the Chaos Thunder Dragon format, and then it came back when Branded Structure Deck, the first one, came out back I think 2022, and this was a popular one to send off Branded Fusion at the time, and I kind of feel like that was part of the reason it came back. And then of course they realized it's still too strong, they banned it again. I'm surprised so many people think it would come back again. I'm open to being convinced. Eclipse Wyvern, so I guess this is also related to like the dragon support that's going to be coming down soon. So this card, I believe, was banned around 2019. And for those of you that played around that time, correct me if I'm wrong, but I vaguely remember this hit being actually kind of out of left field. I mean, we expected some hits to dragon for sure, but this was not the direction that people kind of expected on their bingo card. And it did. I don't know, with like Bystials being around, if that makes this even stronger. I'm not sure, but definitely it's something that people really want back. And Metamorphosis, I wasn't playing around that time, so I can't really comment too much on that. And then lastly, in terms of sort of the overall satisfaction with current Yu-Gi-Oh!, you know what? Essentially, like over half are on the agree or strongly agree side, so sort of on the more positive side. And I think Konami should be pretty happy with that compared to what it's been at some point in the past, let's say during Snake Eye Tier 0 format. And they're, of course, enjoying this format more than Pre-Burst Protocol. And then finally, in terms of whether they're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Consistently, so 24% say that they play less consistently than in 2025. I would fit in that category, but about half being about the same, and another quarter being more consistent than last year in terms of playing. So again, I think Konami would probably be happy with these results as well, especially with all the other different kind of card games that are out there right now. Alright guys, so that was it for the Banlist Prediction Survey results. That was a lot to go through. Thank you for tuning in, and a huge thank you again to those of you that did respond to the survey, that shared the survey. Really appreciate it. This video would not have happened without you guys. But anyways, hope you enjoyed the results, and well, take care guys.